Hey everybody, BigBlackHatMan here, and today I'm going to give you my top 10 westerns. Now, I'm going to do this vlog style, so I didn't script this out, so if I'm hem and haw, I apologize. I'm going to try and rip off James's style when he did his 100 favorite films and just, showed the film and talked about it and moved on. So, I don't know how long this is going to run, I don't know any of this stuff, but so this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to try and approach it this way, and so I've got my films here, and so here we go. But I'm going to start with some honorable mentions, some things that didn't make my list that should have. And first off, we have the Far Country, but this is just Jimmy Stewart. And I criticized the AFI list because there was no Jimmy Stewart. And then I did my list and I realized there's still no Jimmy Stewart, which is too bad because, see, he did really great westerns. He did these, this is one of these Anthony Mann westerns. He did this in Winchester 73, Ben in the River, Man from Laramie. Broken Arrow is a great, very progressive western from 1950, and he's in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. All really good films. Unfortunately, none of them made my list, and so, but I just wanted to bring back up the fact that Jimmy Stewart was a great cowboy and deserves some credit. Unfortunately, he did not make my top 10 list, so Jimmy Stewart. Here we have two films. They're kind of in the same boat. Fort Apache and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Now, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, it gets tagged as a western a lot. You'll see when they list genres of films, it gets the western nod, and I'm not sure why. It takes place in the 30s in Mexico. There's sort of a bandito element, but it's definitely not a movie I consider a western, but it's a great, great film. I would recommend anybody watch it. If I included this as a western, it'd probably be in the top 10. I'm not sure where. I'd have to kind of figure that out, but yeah. And Fort Apache, now this one seems like it's much more of a western. I think, in fact, I've qualified this as a western at times in my life, and it's cavalry versus Indians. Here's the thing, though, it's much more of a military film. It reminds me more of a war movie. You could take the story from this in many ways and put almost any military situation on it. I think it'd be really easy to remake this film in Iraq or Afghanistan today using certain elements from it. Man, we're getting a lot of shine there. So Fort Apache, really great film. Didn't quite make my top 10, and I have a hard time thinking of it as a western, but I just wanted to point it out. Okay, we have, Lonesome Dove. Lonesome Dove was a TV series. So this is western movies, my top 10 western movies. Maybe if I went top 10 pure westerns, maybe this would make the list. I love the miniseries, I love the book. Really intelligently written with really interesting characters. 373 minutes runtime. So you have to have some patience to watch all of this, but it's really, really good. I'm a big fan of Lonesome Dove, but like I said, not really a movie. Okay, and we have our last honorable mention here. We have two western comedies, and I really like western comedies. Western comedies can be really, really funny. Of course, everybody knows this one. Mel Brooks' classic Blazing Saddles, commentary on racism and the western genre and everything, and this is just a hilarious film. I'm guessing there's very few of you watching this who have not seen or at least have knowledge of this film. Now the other one, there's actually two films on this box set, but kind of ignore that top one, but Support Your Local Sheriff. That's the film I want to talk about. They did a pseudo-sequel called Support Your Local Gunfighter. It's not anywhere near as good. Don't recommend that one particularly. But Support Your Local Sheriff, it came out in '68 and was kind of a parody before they became popular. It's definitely not a straightforward western. It's much more about snark and humor, and James Garner stars, and he is just hilarious. So there you go. There are my honorable mentions. Let's dive into the top 10. Let me start out with number 10, Open Range. This is the most recent film on my list, 2002 or 3. I gotta look now. It's embarrassing, right in the middle of the video trying to figure out what year it came out. It doesn't say. It says somewhere, but I can't find it. It was 2002 or 3, I'm not sure. I get the year wrong a lot if you haven't noticed in my videos. This film to me also represents something. There's a lot of westerns released, especially in the last 20 years or so, that are more, actually 30 years, tributes to the genre than maybe individual movies. Now this one really achieves itself as an individual film, but at the same time it's also a tribute to westerns and to specifically the 50s westerns. I mean, here's the thing with this film. John Ford could have directed this, Howard Hawks could have directed this, George Stevens could have directed this. That's And I really like how this film sets up, and the climax is wonderful. And so this is a great film. But as I said, this represents some things for me too. Silverado, which came out in the mid-'80s, which feels more like a tribute to Westerns. Tombstone in 93 is a tribute, almost more than an individual film. Django Unchained, the recent, which is clearly a tribute to spaghetti westerns. Better than most spaghetti westerns, as I said in my vlog on that. And this film, which is my favorite of the group, Open Range. I like the characters, I like the action, I like the story. This has it has weaknesses like all films, but it's one I can sit down and watch anytime. In fact, when they were showing it on TV, I had this bad habit of watching 15 minutes before I remembered, oh yeah, I own this on DVD. So, and, oh yeah, should they remake this film? Well, it came out in 2003, so no. And in a lot of ways, it's a remake itself of Shane and other films. So that one's a pretty obvious one. It's pretty hard to remake. Number 9. The Wild Bunch. Now, I talked about this extensively, right? I've got a whole video on this from the AFI's top 10, because it's in their top 10. As you can see, it's a little bit lower on my list. I think they had it at number 6. I have it at number 9. Great film. Great film. Good characters, good action. Very little to dislike about The Wild Bunch. And whether they should remake this one or not, no. Do not attempt to remake The Wild Bunch, because let me make a little commentary on Sam Peckinpah. His formula struggled to work. Most of his films are pretty mediocre. I don't like Major Dundee. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid's okay. Cross of Arms actually pretty good. I don't like Straw Dogs. I really don't like Straw Dogs. And since he struggled to make it work, taking another director and making them attempt to make his formula work would be almost impossible. So this is why I don't think... Now, if somebody tries to remake The Wild Bunch and set it in a different setting than the Old West, it wouldn't surprise me. But I like this film as is, and I don't really want to see another version of The Wild Bunch. Okay, number 8. We're on number 8. And we're on the one that only a few people have ever heard of, and I only know one other person that's seen. Hell's Hinges. William S. Hart. I think I'm covering up the Hell's Hinges. Yeah. I have talked up Hart and talked up Hart. He was a silent film star, so ahead of his time. He heavily influenced Clint Eastwood. And so this film represents his body of work, and this is my favorite of his films. The climax of this film is so extreme. I think people think of the silent and B-westerns as sort of a played-back thing, like we don't do, overly violent things. Is this film dated? It came out in 1916, so yeah, it's badly dated. There are some scenes in this that are almost laughably silly. There's a scene where he falls in love with the girl, and it's just hilarious. You have to do it different. And getting to that, they should remake this film. This is a film that has a good enough story of redemption and anger and revenge that I want to see this film again. I want to see this film taken by a good director and a good writer and remade. I think it's going to be hard to do well, because honestly, the level at the end of this film of anger is something I think will be hard to match. But I really like this. I can see a lot of people not liking it. If you don't like silence, this is a silent film. There's no talking. I get it. But this is a film I love. I love Hell's Hinges. I can sit down and watch this virtually anytime. So, number 8. Okay, we're on to number 7. And another one I talked about extensively because it was on the AFI's list. Shane. This is such a classic story. Honestly, I'm not even going to recommend watching this film. Read the book. Read the book, because it'll give you insights that the movie just can't. But read the book and then turn around and watch the film. And this is a great story with a great main character. Shane is probably one of the most interesting characters in all of the Western genre. He just flatly has a lot going on, and the other characters are also really good. And yeah, great film. And should they remake this? Well, they already have. They remade Shane a couple of times. Most significantly, Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider. And so you're really quickly, what do I think of Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider? It's good. Not as good as this. I could break down the reasons why I don't think it's as good as this, but it'd take me quite a while. Maybe I'll write an article about it someday. So I like Shane. Great film. Number 7 on my list. And yeah. Okay. Number 6. High Noon. And I have a really I actually really like my DVD cover to High Noon. Pretty awesome. Once again, I talked about this one on the AFI's list when I got to it number 2. Clearly, it's lower on my list, as was Shane, as was The Wild Bunch. It's High Noon. It's a noir western which works really well, which builds an incredible atmosphere, which has a very interesting commentary on people and what they're like. Gary Cooper is great. He deserved the Academy Award he got for this film. They've actually attempted to remake this once. TBS. That's right, TBS did a remake of this film, starring Tom Skerritt. And it's okay. The problem is, this exists. And as long as this exists, and you're making an okay remake, you're going to look like crap, because this is a brilliant film. So, if you're going to remake High Noon, you better know what you're doing. And honestly, I wouldn't even try to copy the noir style of the movie, because do it in a different style, because you will not succeed in matching this. Okay? Number 5. Okay, so we talked in my video about how there was a response to this film, how John Wayne didn't like High Noon. Well, he did, a response, and hold on. I got it in a set, unfortunately. There it is. Rio Bravo. It's actually a really good set, but there's the whole set. Got Fort Apache again. Rio Bravo. Rio Bravo is a really excellent film. Now, it's a story of the professionals taking on the bad guys and doing it because they're the professionals. Unlike High Noon, where he asks for help, they don't ask for help because they're professionals. They're the one who has to handle it. They're the lawmen. They've been hired to do a job, and they're going to do it. And, I mean, I really like this film. The acting is good. Dean Martin is good. I can't think of his name now. Ricky Nelson, and Walter Brennan's in this film. It's a really solid movie. In fact, it's so solid, the people who made this film remade it twice. Howard Hawks, who directed the film, would swear up and down El Dorado was not a remake. But let me tell you, it's the same film. Instead of Dean Martin, it's Robert Mitchum. And there's another film they did called Rio Lobo, which is extremely similar too. So, at the same time though, if somebody wanted to remake Rio Bravo, I'd hear them out. It could be done. Quentin Tarantino's a huge fan of this film, so if he decided to take another stab at westerns, this might be where he goes, and I could see it working. There's actually, you have to really look for it, but in Django Unchained there was a small tribute to this film. So maybe there could be a remake of this film, but it'd be hard to do. You'd have to at least match this film. So really like it. Really interesting story about a town under siege. I recommend seeing Rio Bravo. Like it better than High Noon, to be honest with you, as the response to the same film. So, okay. We're at, number 4. Number 4, the film I ranted and raved about. The Magnificent Seven. Once again, I have it in a set, unfortunately. I wish I don't have it as an individual DVD. How this film is not on the AFI's list boggles my mind. It is the timeliness of, there you can see the other film with a little bit of underrated film, but anyway. The Magnificent Seven is all about futility in the end, and the lifestyle these gunfighters lead, and how it's ultimately destructive. And it's the fact this film was released in 1960 at a time when westerns were starting to decline is really brilliant. The timing is brilliant. It just exemplifies people were starting to realize, the gunfighter life was not all it was cracked up to be. There was definitely a negative downside, and this movie really explores that. And so you get a lot of interesting character development. You have a great bad guy played by Eli Wallach. I really, really like this film, and it not being on the AFI's list is my biggest frustration with that list. Maybe because it was written by Akira Kurosawa. The original Seven Samurai, which is based on, also an excellent, excellent film. I can't recommend that one enough either. Both really good, interesting films, and this one still burns me a little bit on the AFI's list. And they're already remaking it. Yeah, it's going to happen from what I've heard. And Tom Cruise, who did I hear? Tom Cruise, Matt Damon, and actually Kevin Costner, Open Range Kevin Costner is going to be in it so far. It might work. This is kind of a really great story, and so I could see it working again. Just as long as they get those elements of having to do something that maybe necessarily you shouldn't do, you should be smarter than to do, and at the same time realizing the futility of all of it might really work. And so there's number 4, The Magnificent Seven. Okay. Number 3, a film that couldn't make the AFI's list, Once Upon a Time in the West. I really like Sergio Leone. I have issues with all the Dollars trilogy movies, especially The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which I find meandering and digressive as can be, and at times actually loses me a little bit. I thought this was a much more concentrated effort by Leone. If you've ever seen the Dollar trilogy and you found them unfocused, this might be the film to watch. Now, this film has lengthy scenes where everybody's just quiet, but I like that. I like that he was just flexing his cinematic muscle. And the lead in this, Charles Bronson, he does a great job. Henry Fonda is the villain, and man, is he a despicable villain. He's also got Jason Robards and I can't remember, Claudia Cardinal. I always pronounce Claudia Cardinal's name wrong, so I thought I'd look to see if I could get it right. I'm probably still wrong. But this is a great Western, and honestly, it should qualify for the AFI's list because an American production company funded it. It was shot in Monument Valley, John Ford's home, Monument Valley. And so it's a really great film. I think it's Sergio Leone's best, clearly. And should they remake this film? It'd be hard to do. I don't think audiences have a patience. You'd have to... I think this runs like about 2 hours and 10 minutes. 165 minutes. Okay, more than that. So 2 hours and 30 minutes. 35 minutes. You'd have to cut down the running time. You might end up butchering some of the characters a little bit. Maybe a remake, but it would be a challenge. It would be a challenge to get the same sort of... You'd almost have to do a completely different feel and almost different take. But possibly. Once again, though, you'd have to compare it to this, which I think is brilliant. Number 2, Unforgiven. Once again, there's a video on this. AFI put it at number 4, I put it at number 2, so clearly we're pretty close together on this film. Clint Eastwood, great filmmaker, really solid actor, got a great cast together for this film, and told this really interesting story, deep philosophical film about death. It's almost entirely, everything they do and say is about dying and what it means to die and what it means to kill somebody. That's the whole gist of this film. Like I said, great cast, great dialogue. I mean, this is one of the most quotable Westerns, I think, in the history of Westerns. Once Upon a Time in the West has some great quotations, too. There's a few things from Open Range I could quote. There's from the next film. But this one is the most quotable. I mean, there's things from this film I just remember, and I love the dialogue. And pretty much everybody's great in this one. And should they remake this film? No. There's no way you'd hit this magic again. It's just not going to happen. I just don't see how you'd ever hit Clint's style. And you know what? I'm just actually put my foot down and say no. Number 1. Here we go. Number 1. Everybody ready? Anybody who knows me actually knows what number 1 is. The Searchers with John Wayne. It was also the AFI's number 1. And I consider this coincidence more than anything. Because this was, and I told the story when I did the AFI video. 10-year-old me saw this and fell in love with Westerns and fell in love with this particular Western. And I still love it. I don't know how to even go into more in depth on it without spoiling major portions of the film. I decided not to do spoilers today because just this film. Honestly, I think a lot of people would probably struggle to have the love that I have for this film because a lot of it's nostalgia, and I'll be the first to admit it. And secondly, I don't know... You have to be patient to watch a lot of these films. They're quiet films, they're psychological films, and maybe not everybody's got the patience for that. Maybe not everybody likes that kind of film. Maybe they like a faster pace. This film does not have a fast pace, I will tell you that right now. And some of the humor's a little hit and miss. Those are some of the flaws with it. But overall, though, the final scene of this film is the most iconic scene in Western film history, and I will not hedge on that. It is, in my mind, the most iconic. Now here's the deal. They have remade this film twice. spiritually. Both times it was claimed to be a spiritual remake. One was a film called Against a Crooked Sky. Had Richard Boone that is awful. It is just bad. The other was Ron Howard's The Missing, which some of you may have heard of that. Some of you may have even seen it. Tommy Lee Jones, and I should have looked up who the female lead was before I did the video, but I forgot. I guess Kate Blanchett? That's not right. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. The Missing's a good film, but then I compare it to that. And I go, you did not have a lead character like Ethan Edwards. John Wayne's Ethan Edwards in this is the most interesting Western character in my mind. Because he's so deeply angry, and he's so deeply racist, and he hates everybody and everything. But he's so driven at the same time, and he so badly doesn't want to be who he was in a way, who he is. Maybe I read a lot into this character every time I see this film, and The Missing just didn't quite have that same depth with any of their characters. And so it's a good film, but it really loses points for me. What could have easily been a 3.5 out of 5 if I don't really rate films, but if it could have been that, but it drops to a 2.5 because I compare it to this. And so if you're going to remake this film, I'm not going to stop you. Naturally, I can't stop you. I can't stop the Magnificent Seven remake from happening, so I can't stop this one. Do it right, because, man, if we're just going to keep pulling this out and saying, you didn't hit this level, you're not good enough. So, that's my top 10 Westerns. Lastly, next week I'm doing a Q&A. Next week, Monday, I'm going to film a Q&A and put it out. I'd like you to have all questions submitted by, say, Sunday night. Sunday what's the date? I'll look it up right now. 16th. Sunday the 16th. I'd like to have all questions by. You can private message me. I'm going to put something in the forums. Or you can put a comment here. Let's do the Waltz thing. Down below. Doing the Waltz voice in my BigBlackHatMan outfit. That's a little odd, but there it is. There's my top 10 Q&A coming up. I hope you guys shoot me a question. You know, if you want to say anything about top 10 and the honorable mentions, just naturally leave a comment. So, happy trails. Thanks for watching, and watch out for those rough patches. But didn't really consider it for my top 10 as a result. Okay, now here's two. They just didn't make my list. I kind of wish they did. I realized I forgot a movie.